Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, April 26, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week so far and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, we are a news podcast, which means that we do try to watch our language. However, words do fly at the same time. There may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we begin this? Well, before we get to the crazy, we do have to report some sad news on the loss of a great singer, actor, well, all around great stage presence.
That sound etched in music history, but it was Harry Belafonte's mother who taught him how to really use his voice.
She would say to me, never go to bed at night knowing that you have spent a day in which you have done nothing to try to change injustice.
Born in Harlem, raised in Jamaica, and at age 17, he enlisted in the Navy during World War II. After the war, he turned to the stage. His star power quickly exploded, receiving a Tony Award for his Broadway debut in 1953. Then to Hollywood, an Academy Award nomination for the film Carmen Jones just 1 year later. But in 1956, Belafonte would become known as the King of Calypso. His album Calypso would spend 31 weeks at the top of the charts, but his powerful voice transcended music, films, and the stage. A civil rights champion, Belafonte also marched alongside his friend and confidant, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and supported human rights around the world, especially in Africa. In 1985, he gathered the biggest names in music to record We Are the World.
People said, when did you become an activist? I said, the day I was born.
He was recognized with an honorary Oscar for his humanitarian work, cementing EGOT status.
To be rewarded by my peers for my work in human rights and civil rights and for peace. Well, let me put it this way. It powerfully mutes the enemy's thunder.
A life well lived, a man who championed for change. Harry Belafonte was 96 years old.
Wow. I mean, like I said before, legendary singer, civil rights activist, EGOT status winner, Harry Belafonte, as we are regretfully having to report, did pass away. Hopefully he has earned his rest. So definitely rest in power, sir, just because you have given a lot of memorable as well as great leadership. But again, that's another thing for the history course, but definitely rest well, good sir. Moving right along, guys. I did not have this on my bingo card of 2023. I didn't. And trust me, I had a lot of stuff on there. But if you told me that this was going to happen at Fox News, I'd have called you nuts.
Some of Carlson's 3 million viewers will be surprised when they tune in tonight, and they'll find their favorite anchor missing. But if you were watching last hour, this is how you learned on Fox of this dramatic decision.
We have some news from within our Fox family. Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have mutually agreed to part ways. Tucker's last show was this past Friday. We want to thank Tucker Carlson for his service to the network as a host, and prior to that, as a long-term contributor.
I want to bring in our CNN media analyst, Sarah Fisher. Sarah, just the way that was read right there. Harris Faulkner reading that on the air very calmly, very quickly, very dispassionately. Have you learned anything in the minute since we've learned this big news to the big question, which is why?
Well, we've asked Dominion spokespeople if this is explicitly tied. They said that there is nothing they can share yet about whether it's tied to the settlement. But the other thing that we're worried about or thinking about right now is what those tapes from former Fox producer Abby Grossberg may have uncovered. Of course, you'll recall that she was part of this suit in that she claimed that Fox News had sort of meddled with her testimony. She had then put out an amended legal filing shortly before the court case and said that basically there was tapes in which Rudy Giuliani and others were saying things about the voting machine fraud, Dominion, et cetera. So one could ask yourselves, is there something implicating there? But there was nothing that was a part of this agreement, to your point, John, that said that any personnel would be fired from the settlement. In fact, within this settlement, there wasn't even any requirement that Fox had to apologize or retract any of its reporting.
And Sarah, he said the 8 o'clock hour, since Megyn Kelly moved on. That's almost 7 years. I think 6 are going on 7 years ago now. The timing, you could look backwards and you look just a week or so ago, the Dominion settlement. You can also look forward. Fox, whatever you think of it, whatever people watching think of the network, making this decision as we head into a 2024 presidential campaign cycle. Somebody who, as we noted, had the first post-arraignment interview with the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, who's the Republican frontrunner. For a network that prides itself on its political coverage, to do this at this moment is stunning and tells you something.
Absolutely does. Not only was Tucker Carlson like the highest rated personality on Fox, John, he was one of the highest rated shows on all of cable. So it's an explosive move that Fox is going to do this, especially to your point ahead of the 2024 election. There isn't really like a backup for Tucker Carlson. There's no major personality that brings in the same kind of ratings that he does. The Five does very well, one of their shows, but it's not like they have someone in their stable that they're going to be able to replace him with. I do think it's notable that they didn't give Tucker Carlson a chance to even sign off. To me, that tells you that part of this decision may have been a little bit rushed. We don't know who's going to replace him. All we know for now is that hour will continue with political coverage. They ran a promotional spot earlier today touting an interview with a potential candidate. We just don't know who's going to be the permanent host quite yet.
So, literally and figuratively, I did not have this on my bingo card of 2023. One of the three-headed Hydra at Fox News is no longer there. Douchebag Tucker Carlson, the same guy who decided that M&M's was maybe sexist. The same guy like Ben Shapiro couldn't figure out WAP and thought it was a medical condition. The same guy that, questioned Black Lives Matter but wanted to embrace the Proud Boys. The same guy who basically asked the same dumbass questions that a fourth grader would ask if they haven't been to school all year. That guy. So it's interesting that, yes, Tucker Carlson is out, but the questions remain. Was the fact that, I don't know, maybe the Dominion lawsuit that he was a part of, that he was basically saying that he didn't believe half the BS he was spouting out, that it came back to haunt him? Maybe it's the fact that Fox News is really a not so friendly workplace, albeit fair and balanced. But as we come to find out, the decision came from RuPac's own son, Lachlan. And yes, that is his name.
The show Tucker Carlson Tonight is officially over and rebranded.
But right now, it's time for Fox News Tonight, so let's get started.
A source close to the matter tells NBC News that Lachlan Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch's son, and the head of Fox News, Suzanne Scott, decided to get rid of Carlson last Friday. Today, a spokesperson for Fox would not elaborate on the decision. But Carlson was at the center of potentially damaging developments for the network in recent months. In March, a former Fox producer who worked on Carlson's show filed a lawsuit accusing the anchor and the network of a hostile work environment.
There's a difference between having a thick skin and being subjected to prejudice and being subjected to misogyny day in and day out, and it wears on you.
Carlson has not responded personally to the claims. Fox News says the suit is riddled with false allegations.
Fox News has just paid out $787 million to settle the Dominion lawsuit.
Citing multiple sources familiar with the situation, LA Times reporter Steve Battaglio says the Grossberg litigation played a role in Carlson's departure.
That means more court testimony, more depositions, more bad publicity, and possibly another big check. I think they want to avoid that, and one way to do it was to start with getting rid of Tucker.
NBC News has not confirmed the reporting. Beyond Grossberg's suit, text messages revealed through the now settled litigation with Dominion Voting Systems exposed Carlson's frustration with management. In the days following the election, audience numbers dropped more than a third, in part because Fox called the state of Arizona for Joe Biden. According to court documents, Carlson texted, "We worked really hard to build what we have. Those expletives are destroying our credibility. It enrages me." Now, less than 3 years later, Carlson is out of a job.
They have lost big names before, they've replaced them, and they haven't missed a beat in the ratings.
Changing an anchor does not necessarily mean changing the network. Stephanie Gosk.
And she's right. Change an anchor. Tucker Carlson leaving Fox News will definitely not change Fox News. You know why? Because the same thing happened, as you heard from the previous anchor, said to Megyn Kelly. Remember the Megyn report? Remember how this so-called prosecutor was going after everybody in her infamous argument with D.L. Hughley? And where did she wind up? NBC, of all places. NBC dropped Tamron Hall's show to give Megyn Kelly her primetime spot, and Megyn Kelly flopped. She flopped so bad that the NBC executives had to give out the rest of her contract just to get rid of her. In the end, she still won. Now, why am I saying that? Because Tucker Carlson can wind up doing the same thing. Here in Nashville, we have Ben Shapiro and the Daily Beast, where, black girl who believes she's white, Candace Owens, has no problem with her show here in Nashville spouting her bullshit. Tucker Carlson could follow suit. Because I've said this before, guys. If you being conservative and full of controversy means paychecks. Like I always said before, do you think that honestly a lot of these heads at Fox News, which again is an entertainment network, fair and balanced is just a slogan. It means nothing. If you don't believe me, the fact of the matter is everyone on Fox News during that Dominion lawsuit all repeated the same lies. And Dominion apparently got the bag. Now, had I wished they'd taken Fox to the cleaners, had I wished they would have taken Fox to the courtroom, had I wished we could have seen them deposition every Fox supposed quote unquote host and had them ask them why they said what they said, would have been the courtroom event that we all would love to see, because Fox News' fair and balanced would have been on trial. But hey, we're not Dominion. We don't own Dominion. Apparently, Fox News must have threw a Hail Mary and Dominion agreed, so they settled for nearly $800 million. Now, why does that matter about Tucker Carlson? It matters about Tucker Carlson because, again, he can be called in as a witness and a statement. So as the journalist said, right now, Fox News is doing damage control for another lawsuit we will get to very shortly. But again, Tucker Carlson will pop up somewhere. If Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly, I should say, or if Rush Limbaugh, if that son was still living, oh, trust me, they'll be somewhere. They'll be somewhere. They'll have a following. They will probably still spill or shoot the same BS they've done before. So yes, the three-headed hydra at Fox News may have been cut down to two, but trust me, they'll find somebody else. Just like Sean Hannity might be next. Laura Ingraham might be next. Anyone on the five may be next. But trust and believe at Fox News, just because you got rid of Tucker Carlson does not mean that the train is stopping, unfortunately. But that's not the only thing that actually happened this week from the Fox News side. Although from the CNN side, this is interesting. The fact that Don Lemon, he got fired.
With anchor Don Lemon.
Another stunning announcement. This comes earlier today. This came actually in an email to CNN staffers from CEO Chris Licht over at CNN. I'll read you what he said in his email. He said, CNN and Don have parted ways. Don will forever be a part of the CNN family, and we thank him for his contributions over the past 17 years. And it goes on. But Don Lemon came out and he was more explicit. He said that the network had fired him, and then he really lashed out and said that he was hoping that someone in management would have had the decency to tell him directly about this firing. And CNN PR then put out a statement separately saying that what Don Lemon had said was not accurate, and that Don Lemon did have the opportunity to meet with management. So there's a back and forth playing out over there at CNN in public as well.
All right, let's talk about NBC Universal. Big news out of there.
So as you heard it, guys, Don Lemon, depending on who you believe, sat there. He could have been let go. He could have been fired. It's amazing how one side is saying, oh, well, we mutually agreed to part ways. Don Lemon is acting like, well, nobody told me. I kind of feel like the guy that showed up to work on Friday and no one told him that the key doesn't work anymore. Now, Don Lemon, no matter how you cut the mustard, because again, I was wondering this for a second. Because I mean, Don Lemon went from reserved, a little more conservative Don Lemon, to that one New Year's Eve party, woke Don Lemon came out. You know, no F's given Don Lemon came out. Now, although there are some things that I did agree and disagree with him on, I found it interesting that at the time that Tucker Carlson was getting fired from getting dropped from Fox News, so was Don Lemon, one of their more highly rated anchors from CNN. And it kind of reminded me of something that just happened very recently that makes me wonder, was it the final straw for Don Lemon at CNN? And I think it was with a conservative candidate, conservative presidential candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy, however you say that name. But anyway, this was an excerpt from the actual conversation they had. And again, Don came out.
1865. You want to know when it happened? We fought a civil war in this country to give black Americans the equal protection under the law that we failed to secure them in 1776. But then you want to know what happened? Southern states passed anti-gun laws that stopped black people from owning guns. The Democrat Party, then as in now, wanted to put them back in chains.
Then, as in now, that's quite an accusation about the current Democratic Party. Who and what were you referring to?
I was referring to Joe Biden and his expression of wanting to put them back in chains, dating back to Lyndon Johnson. I think Lyndon Johnson's so-called Great Society was one of the greatest misnomers in American political history, where even back then in the 1960s, 70% plus of black kids were born into two-parent homes. Today, that number is less than 30% in the opposite direction. The very policies that we implemented in this country in the name of helping black Americans have actually been disastrous for black Americans and all Americans. And I think that that's something that we need to wake up to.
In 1865, you were talking about the black codes, right?
That's right.
Passed, enacted to make it a crime for a black person to carry a gun
Exactly.
in the South. But you're equating that to the current president? You're referring to economic chains? What are you saying?
Well, I was referring to Joe Biden's, I think, ill-chosen expression to say they're the party that wants to put you back into chains. What I'm actually saying is that if you look at the policies of the modern Democratic Party,
Democrats.
Absolutely. So what I'm saying is that actually it's policies like that of Lyndon Johnson and Joe Biden that are actually holding black Americans back.
The war on poverty?
Yes. And in particular, his Great Society, where he actually created incentives in the family, where if you're a family, you could actually get more money by not having the father in the home. Guess what you get? You get what you pay for. I think it's been really bad for the black community. I think it's really bad for all Americans.
What do you have anything on this before I move on to Cheyenne?
I don't see what one has to do with the other, but go on. I took up a lot of time with Fox.
Oh, it's fine. We have time.
I don't really see what one has to do with the other, especially consider and using the Civil War to talk about black Americans. That war was not fought for black people to have guns. That's not.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country. Yeah. Actually, that's why the Civil War was fought.
Okay.
And the sad part about it,
fought for black people to have guns. I think.
Actually, you know, funny fact is black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. And I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
And you live in this country, then you can disagree with me. But we're not. You mentioned that we have three different shades
Don, I
of
think we have to be able to
here.
talk about these issues in the open, regardless of the color of our skin. Black Americans today, to say that, compare that to 1865 and 1964,
I think for you to compare it to
absolutely
1865 and
have equal rights in this country.
actually, I think it's insulting to black people. It's insulting to me as an African American. I don't want to sit here and argue with you because it's infuriating for you to put those things together. It's not right. Your telling of history is wrong. what you're
What part of the history was wrong? Don?
What
What part of the history was wrong?
that the Civil War was fought. You're making people think that the Civil War was fought for black people, only for black people to get guns and for black people to
The
have.
Civil War was fought for
rights.
black people in this country to get freedoms, a noble mission. And I think that even
Yes, you're right. But it
after
wasn't-
we
but
succeeded, we had to actually secure
reduce
those
it-
freedoms.
To reduce it in a speech at the NRA, to say you're making people think, or you're trying to say that black people to get guns, that was the reason that you're there at the NRA. That was the reason for the Civil War.
It
I
is
think
a
that's
fact.
reductive.
It's not
and I think
reductive,
it's
Don.
insulting. There are a whole plethora of reasons that for
Look,
the Civil
with due
War,
respect,
including-
I find your explanation reductive and actually insulting, including to black Americans, to say that black people today, compared to 1964, 1865, haven't made progress in part because of the freedoms we secured. And the Second Amendment was
Black
part
people,
of what
hang
secured
on,
them that
please. I
freedom.
cannot keep a thought if you guys are talking to me in my ear. So hang on one second. So to say that black people, say what you said again.
Black people secured their freedoms after the Civil War. It is a historical fact, Don. Just study it. Only after their Second Amendment
people
rights
have-
were secured.
They
That's
were
a
not
fact.
secured their freedoms after the Civil War. That is not, you are discounting Reconstruction. You're discounting a whole host of things that happened after the Civil War when it comes to African Americans, including the whole reason that the Civil Rights Movement happened is because black people did not secure their freedoms after the Civil War, and that things turned around. People tried to change the freedoms that were supposed to
And you know
happen
how they
after the
got
Civil
it?
War
They got their
and
Second Amendment
Reconstruction.
rights, and they actually got the NRA played a big role in that. But today, Don, the
The NRA did not play a big role.
absolutely,
in
they
that.
trained
That
black Americans
is
how
a
to use
lie.
firearms.
That's a lie. That's
That-
not. The
it's
NRA did not play a big role.
This
in
is
that.
just historical fact.
It's
But
not
Don,
historical fact.
the part that I
Just
find
because you say it's historical
the
fact,
part that
it's
I
not
find
historical fact.
insulting is when you say today black Americans don't have those rights after we have
The
gone
fact
through
that I find
civil rights
insulting
revolution
is
in this
that
country.
You are sitting here telling an African American about the rights and what you find insulting about the way I live, the skin I live in every day.
Here's
And
where you and I
know
have
the
a different
freedoms
point
that
of view.
black and white that black people don't have in this country, and that black people do have.
Well, here's where you and I have a different point of view. I think we should be able to express our views regardless of the color of our skin. We should have this debate
I'm not saying you
without
shouldn't
me
express your
regarding
views,
you as a
but I think
black
it's
man,
insulting that
but
you're
me
sitting
regarding you
here-
as a fellow citizen.
That you're
That's what I
sitting
think we
here,
should see.
whatever ethnicity you are, explaining to me
Whatever ethnicity
about
I'm, I'll
what
tell
it's like to be black. in
Whatever
America.
ethnicity
I'm
I'll tell
sorry.
you what I am. I'm an Indian American. I'm proud of it. But I think we should have this debate. Black, white, doesn't matter.
I think we should have this
on the
debate. but I think
content
you should-
of the
if you're gonna
ideas.
do it, you should do it in an honest way and in a
I
fair
think-
way. And what you're doing is not an honest and fair way. Okay,
with-
but we appreciate you coming on.
With
Thank
due
you for
respect,
that.
Don, I look forward to
Thank you very
continuing
much.
that
I appreciate
conversation.
it. We'll
Thank
continue
you.
the conversation.
Ooh, you know what? That I believe, and this is just a guess. This is a guess. I think that conversation, and again, with Vivek Ramaswamy, with a name like that, I swear to God, he should be selling used cars. But the way he just said all that, and Don, you look, as black people, you can tell when we are fed up with the BS. He had the whole, okay, let's just, he was ready to wrap it up. But leave it to his co-host to go, it's okay, Don. You can talk. Don was like, okay, I'm gonna let's set some things straight. Because Vivek Ramaswamy, for all those that don't know, he is definitely for the NRA, as you can tell in the video that we just shown. But there are some things I do want to clear up along with Don Lemon, because number one, let me be completely honest. Number one, the Civil War. And I say this because the BS that you're told in elementary school that the Civil War was fought over slavery, that, the South did not want to give up their slaves, while the northern states, the Union, them, were wanting to impress that upon them to actually have a more collected, unified area, or I should say state. And of course, the South rebelled, the Confederacy was created, and we have the Civil War. That's the lie. The truth about the Civil War and why it started: money. Because the North wanted the South to pay its slaves money. And the South, almost in some aspects to this day, looks at their workforce like slaves. Why should we pay them? They're our property. Even though the North said, no, you must pay fair wages. So, for not to bust your bubble, and feel free to look this up, because 95% of most historical scholars out there all agree the Civil War was basically fought on money. Kind of like how most wars are. So number one right there is amazing to me how he says, well, blacks didn't get their freedoms until their Second Amendment rights. Because again, this is going back to the NRA, the right to bear arms. And once again, this is why we need to go to history. For all those that don't know, there was a certain party out there called the Black Panthers who studied the Second Amendment better than most gun nuts, especially those in the NRA. Why? Because for all those that don't remember, the Black Panthers literally went to the California State House armed with 357 Magnums, 12-gauge shotguns, 45 caliber pistols, and announced the time has come for Black people to arm themselves. You know what happened next? California Governor then Ronald Reagan helped to pass the Mumford Act, a state bill prohibiting the open carry of loaded firearms, along with an addendum prohibiting loaded firearms in state capitol. This bill was in 1967. You know who else helped to write this bill? The NRA. So it is amazing to me that he wants to say, and this is why I say where Vivek is wrong, because Vivek said that the NRA supported Black people owning guns, which is not true since the NRA helped to write the Mumford Act back in 1967, which was a response to the Black Panthers arming themselves and encouraging other African Americans to arm themselves. So Vivek, in that case, you're kind of full of shit. But again, who knows why? And I have to give D.L. Hughley credit for this because he said it before me. It is amazing how Tucker Carlson got fired for literally for almost a decade spewing BS. And the one time a Black person corrects another person on Black history, all of a sudden they are now gone. I just find that coincidental. One gets fired for not telling the truth, and one gets fired for telling the truth. So does this hurt credibility on both sides? For Fox, no. Fox News is a joke. Fox News is not fair and balanced. Fox News is an entertainment network pretending to be a news station. Does this hurt CNN? Maybe. Because CNN will lose credibility. Because keep in mind, NBC did the same thing a few years ago, where Tamron Hall was having her own weekend show, one of their highest rated shows on NBC, and they dropped her to bring on Megyn Kelly because she was a hot topic from Fox News, and turned a complete 180 from her heavy conservative stance to a more leaning liberal light stance, and the audience wasn't buying it. So again, it just makes no sense. I did not have this on my bingo card for Tucker Carlson to get his pink slip. Not crying, not losing sleep over that. But it's amazing that Don Lemon did the one thing that we all should do as Black people: call out the BS and tell history the right way. So yes, I am saddened that Don Lemon has lost his, is no longer a part of CNN. But I guarantee he will be somewhere else. But moving right along, guys, this is the reason why Fox News is batting down the hatches, because after paying out nearly $800 million to Dominion, there is another $1 billion lawsuit on the horizon, and I hope to God this company chooses not to settle.
Another pricey showdown over the lies that it spread about the 2020 election. It just settled with Dominion Voting Systems for over $787 million, but its liability doesn't end there. Voting technology company Smartmatic is suing Fox for $2.7 billion. CNN's Danny Freeman has the details.
After a historic settlement for Dominion Voting Systems,
the truth matters. Lies have consequences.
The potential consequences of another defamation case loom on the horizon for Fox News. Even before Dominion filed its $1.6 billion lawsuit saying Fox knowingly lied about its voting machines, Smartmatic, a different voting technology company, filed a similar suit. This one seeking $2.7 billion in damages, accusing Fox News, several of its hosts, and Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani of falsely saying Smartmatic rigged the 2020 election. In its complaint, Smartmatic alleges Fox knowingly aired more than 100 false and misleading statements, including this one.
I have spoken with a few whistleblowers myself this weekend, and one source who is an IT specialist told me that he knows the software and specifically advised people in Texas, officials in Texas, not to use it. And yet he was overruled.
The company also argued Fox falsely claimed Smartmatic was linked to former Venezuela President Hugo Chavez.
Smartmatic agreed to create such a system and produce the software and hardware that accomplished the result for President Chavez. After the Smartmatic electoral management system was put in place, he closely observed several elections where the results were manipulated using the Smartmatic software.
Fox denies wrongdoing, saying they were just covering the news, an argument the Dominion judge threw out. Smartmatic's case is currently still in the discovery phase at this time. Meanwhile, CNN has learned exclusive new details about how yesterday's $787 million Dominion settlement came to be. Sources tell CNN's Oliver Darcy and Marshall Cohen Fox and Dominion couldn't lock in a deal themselves over the weekend, so they called veteran mediator Jerry Roscoe. Roscoe, who's helped resolve wartime disputes in the Balkans, was on a cruise in Europe on Sunday when he was brought in a day before the trial was set to begin. After several Zoom meetings and phone calls, the deal was finalized around 2 Tuesday afternoon and signed just minutes before the judge announced the resolution in open court. Now, since the Dominion settlement came down, we actually have received statements from both Smartmatic and from Fox previewing their own case and what that battle will look like ahead. An attorney for Smartmatic said, in part, Dominion's litigation exposed some of the misconduct and damage caused by Fox's disinformation campaign. Smartmatic will expose the rest. Meanwhile, a Fox spokesperson said in response, quote, "We will be ready to defend this case surrounding extremely newsworthy events when it goes to trial, likely in 2025. As a report prepared by our financial experts show, Smartmatic's damages claims are implausible, disconnected from reality, and on its face intended to chill First Amendment freedoms. So you can expect we may be talking about all of these issues again for the next 2 years."
So the way we look at this, guys, if I'm Smartmatic, and I know the chances of them listening to this podcast are slim and none, but Smartmatic, all I can sit there and say, truly, please don't settle. Please, if you get the opportunity to take Fox News to court, to take the Fox News network, and you can take them to court on behalf of all Americans, please do that. Because number one, we want to see it. We want to see the network whose slogan is fair and balanced get their ass put to the fire. Why? Because we want to see them squirm, and it's the truth. Because again, with SmartView, with Dominion, their names got ran through the mud 24/7 on Fox News. So it only makes sense that now the rabbits got the gun. They should have fun with it. So crossing our fingers, we hope it goes to trial. And like I said, I hope SmartView doesn't settle. But moving right along, guys, we did also get some other news that we already knew about. But apparently our President Joe Biden had to create a Transformers-like commercial to announce his running for president in 2024. When I say Transformers, you'll understand.
And with big news, significant breaking news. President Biden has made it official, announcing he is running for re-election. Just moments ago, he released this announcement video. Watch.
Freedom, personal freedom, is fundamental to who we are as Americans. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred. That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what healthcare decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love, all while making it more difficult for you to be able to vote. When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead, we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
President Biden taking his first steps.
Realized that I'm just muted, so I apologize. I realized I was just muted this entire time. I apologize. But again, going back to Joe Biden, yeah, it's different just because presidentially wise, I give him a C, but the man's got an uphill climb. I mean, first off, his age. I mean, he's already in his 80s by the time he comes out out of his second term, if he's elected. He would be up there. At the same time, he has to face and win over a lot of progressives because he really started out as a progressive president, moving forward with trying to raise minimum wage, trying to raise a lot of awareness, trying to actually cut back on tax cuts, give tax cuts back to the middle and lower classes and take them away from the top percent, increase the corporate tax. The man had a wish list. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, it could be the fact of Reconstruction. It could be the fact that Democrats had a slim majority in the Senate with Madam Vice President Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker. It could be that Senator Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema were basically the wrench in the monkey plans for his progressive movement. And he's again asking us to trust him for another 4 years. I'm going to be honest. Like I said before, Biden has done a okay job, but it's more like he was managing a crappy Taco Bell that was only popular because it was open 24/7. That's his management style. Is he a little out of touch? Yeah. I mean, granted, he did try to get some form of student loans in, but look how long it took him to actually sit there and say, I'm going to try to wipe out $10,000 to $20,000 of student loan debt, when student loan debt could be almost in the dang near $250,000 depending on your profession. But again, I'm not trying to knock him because at the same time, he had a Democratic Party that was not united. 2 Senate Democrats who were moderates, I call them Republican lights, really put the kibosh on a lot of things. And one of those guys is Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Manchin, who decided to go on Fox News and say that, you know what, I may have been okay with agreeing to a bill, but now I might change my mind.
Virginia. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Hey, Shannon, good to be with you.
Okay, so you're getting a lot of attention this week for an op-ed that you wrote. It sounds like you're having potential second thoughts about the deal you made to get the Inflation Reduction Act passed. You say the administration is attempting at every turn to implement the bill it wanted, not the bill Congress actually passed. Have you discussed it? Will you discuss it with President Biden?
I sure hope so, and I've been discussing it with all of his basically administration, and I'm very, very disappointed in how they have interpreted a piece of legislation That is not how it was written. It was not the intent. And it's not the agreement that President Biden and I had. So I'm hoping that he intervenes and basically says, listen, we need energy security. We have to produce fossil energy cleaner and better than ever before, but we need an amount of it that we can be energy independent and secured as a nation. We can also invest in the technologies that will have energy for the future. We did both. And they're trying to now implement a bill, Shannon, that we didn't write. And it's a bill they didn't pass. So just do our job, follow the law, do your job.
So I know that one of the sticking points seems to be the new regulations that came out, the proposed regulations with respect to electric vehicles, about how much of that should be domestic production. You know, the White House is going to say they're relying on experts for these regulations, and there's now a public comment period open to anybody who wants to weigh in. I mean, isn't that the protocol?
Well, the protocol would have been to implement the bill exactly. We laid out the bill and wrote the bill in a way that it told you what was sourcing and processing and what was manufacturing. The whole purpose is to bring basically reliable supply chains to America, be able to manufacture the healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and we've done that. But if they don't implement it in a way that it was written and implement it in a way they desire, they just want to throw caution to the wind and put more money out and throw more money from the Treasury in credits that basically are not going to accelerate how quickly that we can be totally self-reliant in America. There's nothing wrong with us bringing manufacturing. We should not be dependent and relying on China's supply chain. You know, I said I'm old enough to remember standing in line in 1974 to buy gasoline to go to work. I don't want to stand in line to buy a battery to run a vehicle and waiting on it from China. That's
Yep, that sounds exactly like the guy who sat there and said, back in my day, gas was under $1.45. You know, if you go down to Smithy's will give you a top off and an oil change for $5 whole. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. This is why I sit there and say senators like Joe Manchin are out of touch. Of course, the embattled senator from West Virginia is really... the man's really a Republican. He calls himself a moderate Democrat. I've said it before. Moderate Democrats are like Republican light. For the simple fact of the matter is, his home state is nothing but coal and fossil fuels. And the energy bills that are being put out are trying to get away from fossil fuels. We are trying to invest more in renewable energy, green energy, electric vehicles, and such, because I hate to break it to everybody, fossil fuels does have a finite number. And when that last drop of oil is gone, what else is going to power our vehicles, our homes, our aircrafts, things of that nature? Eventually, we do have to have a energy alternative. Joe Manchin, being from a state that's known for fossil fuels and cleaning and coal mining, are becoming outdated. But again, he doesn't want to say that. He wants to focus on the fact that the new turn is going toward electric vehicles. And again, we all know that electric vehicles are becoming the new wave of the future. But he also sat there and says about manufacturing. Again, this is what kills me about politicians when they sit there and say about manufacturing. We shouldn't have to compete with China. Well, you shouldn't, but here's the problem. China can produce the same quality goods at a much lower price versus in the US where it might be higher. So I'm trying to understand this because you're basically telling businesses out there, billion-dollar businesses like Amazon, by the way, like Alibaba, like Wish, like Temu, that a lot of people like using because it's low prices, but it comes overseas. Especially for Wish, if you're willing to wait a couple of weeks, do you understand the stuff you can get on Wish for $10 or less? People will literally wait for stuff to be shipped from China and Japan just because it's $10 or less. You are not going to compete in countries like Japan and China and Brazil when the manufacturing costs are so low over there because of what they pay their employees. Whereas here, post-COVID, a lot of employers are now realizing that a lot of these workers out here are not taking the BS minimum wage jobs anymore. And so this is why I sit there and say Joe Manchin is living out of time. That until he realizes that his state and the state's industry is going the way of the dinosaur, literally and figuratively, He's going to argue alternative fuels. And if he doesn't get his way, guess what he'll do? He'll sit there and say, well, I'm not for this. I'm voting against it. And here's the problem. When you, at one point, the Democrats had a slim majority, you had to get all the Democrats on board. If you didn't, the bill was dead in the water. That's why minimum wage wasn't increased. That's why we didn't get our Voting Rights Act put in place, where it would have been sweet if we did have it. Because again, just to remind people, what was in that Voting Rights Act? Number one, voting the day to vote would have been a federal holiday, which means that you wouldn't have to go to work, which means you would have to decide whether you're going to go into work and leave early just to vote or not get caught up in the polls, things of that nature. You know what else was in the Voting Rights Act? Automatic voter registration based on citizenship. If you're a U.S. citizen, you are automatically enrolled. Would have been a great thing. And on top of that, that literally just those two things alone would have made election days in the U.S. a lot simpler. Manchin hated both. Don't know why. For something that's supposed to be relatively simple, he did not like it. And that alone should tell you that Manchin and Sinema, two Democratic senators, if they don't agree, everything goes south. So I'm gonna, good luck, President Biden, because these two people are these same individuals who are still going to be in the Senate, who are still representing the Democratic Party, and will basically be doing the Republicans' job for them as far as instructing everything. But they're not alone, because Republicans, again, predictable because the debt ceiling is coming up, have sat there and said, hey, the only way this debt ceiling plan is going to work is that you look at our requirement for people receiving Medicaid and food stamps that they have to report to work. Yep, it's not 1999. Trust me, this is the same thing House Republicans have always said, that they have sat there and said that we are requiring more low-income Americans to work in order to receive government benefits, particularly food stamps and Medicaid, because they see it as a trade-off. This allows them to reduce government spending while bolstering the neighbor's labor force at a time when many businesses are still struggling to staff up. That is one of the things Republicans want to do. And here's the thing I'm going to say about this, because a lot of people say this all the time. There are plenty of jobs out there. Last time the job report came out, it was a little over 9 million jobs that were open. Here's the problem. You can have all the jobs open if you want to. Check the minimum wage. The minimum wage in the U.S. is still $7.29. Been that way since 2009. So a lot of these jobs out here, you probably see 9, 10, 11, 12. I think at McDonald's here in the south of Tennessee, I think they just now upped the minimum wage to $14, $15 an hour. So again, nobody can live off $14, $15 an hour. You can't even get a 2-bedroom apartment with that rate. And yet they want people to kill themselves for poverty wages. And you have Republicans who, by the way, their salaries are guaranteed for life once they're elected. Even after they no longer serve in the House or the Senate, Republicans still get their salary. Republicans still keep their health care. Republicans, depending on the type of position they have, may or may not be able to keep their security detail. But at the same time, these individuals who only work so many months out the year are telling Americans who are struggling, hey, we need y'all to be working in order to get these benefits. Well, if everything was sweeter, if minimum wage was increased and jobs are actually paying people, guess what? A lot of people wouldn't need Medicare or wouldn't need welfare, Medicaid, or food stamps, because they would be able to buy it with their own money. But this is where the Republicans are just busy trying to backfill the workforce, because the lie is that if you give certain Americans money, they will not be inclined to work. Not realizing that the baby boomers are slowly cycling out. And right now it's Generation X and Generation X and Y, and they're not going the same way the boomers are going, because a lot of people have sat there and looked, especially post-COVID, started to look at work differently. So Republicans, again, because they want to hold the debt ceiling hostage, that they want to sit there and say, the only way we're going to approve this debt ceiling is that we got to force Americans to go back to work. Yeah, that's not going to work the way they want to, but this is the GOP we're talking about. They're not in the interest of the American people, just corporations and rich people. We should not be surprised about that. But speaking of things that will really hurt you, unfortunately, in this case for home ownership, if you're like myself and you're trying to find a new home, well, there's a new federal mortgage rules being put into place, and it affects those who are just simply trying to do better.
That could bring major changes for home buyers is receiving some backlash. It's all part of an effort to make home buying more affordable with those with limited income, but it could mean higher costs for buyers who have a good credit score. Business reporter Alexis Christoforous is here with more on that. Alexis, start by just explaining what these new rules do and why do this.
Okay, all good questions. So first off, they take place next week, so May 1st. They're being implemented by the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And as you said, they're really there to sort of promote equitable access to home ownership, because right now in this country, we have still low inventory, high interest rates, and the average price of a home right now, a selling price in this country, is over $420,000. So in a nutshell, people with lower credit scores may get a break on their mortgage fees with these new rules, while people with higher credit scores, better credit scores, may still pay less than the others, but they may not get as much of a break.
Is this something that could affect current homeowners, or is this just for new homeowners?
That's a great question, too. This is just for new homeowners. So if you're looking to secure a mortgage and buy a home after May 1st, these rules apply to you.
Do they apply to all mortgage loans?
No, they don't. So only those mortgages that are backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are going to be impacted, and not everyone is going to see an impact on their monthly mortgage payment.
Who's going to feel this the hardest?
Well, you know, it's a combination, and we actually pulled together a real life example for folks so they can get a feel. So if you have a $300,000 loan at a credit score that's less than 659, meaning it's not great, you could save $3,750 in closing costs. Now, if your credit score is 740 or better, meaning you have really good credit, you may wind up paying $375 more in closing costs. The folks at Urban Institute sort of did an analysis on this. They broke this down and did the math. That could amount to about $10 more a month for most mortgages. So it's not going to break the bank, but it does mean you're paying a little bit more.
Now, a little bit more compared to what you were paying before, but overall, do you still have lower payments overall if you have a good credit score versus a bad credit score?
And that's what we cannot lose sight of, is that it still matters to have good credit, because in the long run, you're going to be getting an overall better package deal on a house if you can show that you've made timely payments and that you have good credit and that you're a strong candidate for that house. You know, some of the critics are saying, you know, it sounds like people with good credit are getting penalized here, and that maybe they're subsidizing people with lower credit, that maybe people who shouldn't be even getting loans for a home will be getting them under these new rules, which sort of harken back to all the problems we had with home loans that kicked off the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
We're not talking about that here. This is a way to sort of spread out the mortgage situation so that people who can't afford it might be able to with a little bit more help.
So this is about this one particular fee, not necessarily your interest rate or whether or not the bank will give you.
Closing costs, for example, are as part of this mortgage fee. And what they do is they're just breaking it up into the monthly payments you would pay over the life of the loan. So for most folks, it'll mean about $10 more a month.
All right. Alexis, thank you for that.
Okay, so let's break this down for a second, because I felt like when I first heard this, I was like, wait a minute. So if you've done the work, built up your credit, really have it to a nice score, you know, all that hard work and stuff you put into it to really show that you can handle money, you can handle finances, that you can do well, and you're telling me that I'm going to get dinged for it because I have better credit? Now, after watching that, either that now we have to avoid Freddie Mac, we had to avoid Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans because they seem to be adjusted to that. See, when I hear stuff like that, the only thing I can think of is that how in the world, because banks are still gonna win. Does this make the American dream of owning a home slightly more difficult? Yes, it does. I mean, forget the fact of the matter that there are programs out there to help you land a home, but with the way banks have been acting lately with interest loans and the Fed raising interest rates, the idea of owning a home seems to get farther and farther away. When you have companies out there who are homeownership lending companies or hedge fund managers who are part of conglomerates who are buying up land. Because I can tell you right now in Tennessee, we have a lot more apartments going up than actual homes. And I've said it before, the banks look at it this way. Most financial houses look at it this way. What's more profitable, a renter or a homeowner? Because yes, a homeowner does have to pay a lot more upfront, but eventually that homeowner will that homeowner will eventually stop paying and own the home. Versus a renter is like a infinite cash stream for as long as they pay. Because you know the one thing about renters, they're never short in supply, and a lot of financial houses out there have realized that. So instead of building homes, they now build apartments. Call me if I'm wrong on that. But again, this seems to be only affecting Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans, so do with that as you will. I just know that when me and my fiance are looking for a home and I hear, Fannie Mac and Freddie, I was like, nope, I'm good. We're not using them. I'd rather go somewhere else. I'll have to keep that in mind. But speaking of things to keep in mind, guys, we also did cover this as well about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and a lot of ethical questions come into place concerning he was wined and dined by GOP's super donors. Chief Justice John Roberts was called in to discuss ethics, and he declined.
Turning now to Capitol Hill, where Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts has declined an invitation to testify at a congressional hearing regarding ethics rules for members of the Supreme Court. The calls for a hearing come after reports that Justice Clarence Thomas took trips paid for by a wealthy Republican donor. For more, we're joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. So, Ryan, good morning. What more can you tell us here about the Chief Justice's decision here not to testify? And also, what are we hearing from people on the panel like Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin?
Lindsay, it's not a big surprise that the Chief Justice chose not to accept the invitation from the Senate Judiciary Committee. There's always been a pretty clear line between the authority of the court and the authority of Congress. But these new questions about ethics surrounding the Chief Justices, the justices in particular, I should say, has members of Congress starting to be concerned. And that's why they wanted Roberts to come before the panel and answer questions. Now, the Democrats on this panel are in a bit of a bind because the only other option they would have to compel Justice Roberts to come and speak before the panel would be a subpoena. But because of the issues that they have with Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, who is still dealing with a medical absence, would make it impossible for them to get enough votes to subpoena Justice Roberts. So it seems pretty clear that at this point, it's just going to be a war of words between the two sides and no real conversation taking.
Okay. So it just seems like, and I say this because, okay, for all of us don't remember, we did report that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas may have for a number of years been wined and dined by a GOP donor on trips, at his private, on his yacht, things of that nature. And the fact that he did not report this to the Ethics Committee, and that brought up concerning the fact that the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, that these judges, if not held to an exceptional level of integrity and ethical view, that Clarence Thomas has decided that, no, I'm good. And so, yes, Chief Justice should have been brought into place to sit there and say, hey, should there not be an ethical review since Justice Clarence Thomas did not report any of these findings? And you have Chief John Justice going, I don't want to talk about it. What does that say when the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, won't even hold its own accountable? It's almost as if we're taking everything that used to be the tip of the spear, the end of the line, and we now question it. And we shouldn't for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should be exactly what we say it is. It should be that end of the line where certain landmark cases finally get rulings on. But as we have seen, the Supreme Court has also struck down laws such as Roe versus Wade, and now they are picking up the case of abortion pills being in the mail, which I believe we have an answer on that very shortly. But when it comes to ethical positions, the Supreme Court justices, they're no different. They're not special. They should be held to it. And I'm sorry, if I was Chief Justice, yes, I'll be asking questions to Clarence Thomas as to why none of this was reported. Because again, you're a judge taking money from a political donor. It looks, it smells, it walks like a duck. Quack, quack. Simple and plain. But it's amazing to me that Supreme Court Justice John Roberts has declined and has not provided a reason. And unfortunately, because of Democrats and the age limits that have yet to be put on senators and representatives, and by age limits, I mean term limits, because again, you have the older generation slowly cycling out. And I've said this before about Congress. Congress needs to have the same type of term limits that they have on the presidency, should also be for the Senate and the House of Representatives. And also for the Supreme Court. It should be the same case. Supreme Court should run a 2 presidential term, which means that if it was me and I was writing the laws, every Supreme Court justice would serve for 8 years. You would serve 2 full presidential terms. After 8 years, you step down. It should be that, because that's how you make things efficient. Because let's be honest, the most profitable job in America right now is a politician. Don't believe me? Look at Tennessee. That'll tell you everything you want to know. But speaking of things that'll tell you everything they want to know, GOP hopeful Nikki Haley has decided to say that, hey, we need a consensus on abortion. You heard me right. Nikki Haley, potential GOP presidential candidate for 2024, sat there and said, we need a consensus on abortion. If only someone told her about Roe versus Wade.
I said I want to save as many babies and help as many moms as possible. That is my goal. To do that at the federal level, the next president must find national consensus. That might sound strange to many people. Under Roe, consensus was replaced by demonization. And let's be honest, most in the media prioritize demonization. They stoke division, pitting Americans against each other. No one talks about finding consensus. Everyone goes to the barricades and attacks the other side. They've turned a sensitive issue that has long divided people into a kind of gotcha bidding war. How many weeks are you for? How many exceptions are you for? And the list goes on. But these questions miss the point if the goal is about saving as many lives as possible. You don't save any lives if you can't enact your position into law. There is broad political agreement that we should never pressure moms into having an abortion. They should get support to carry their baby to term. They should be able to get information from pregnancy resource centers, and especially about adoption. We must do better when it comes to adoption, to make it easier for adoptive parents and to avoid children growing up in a government system with too little love. My husband is reason number one that I stand for life. Every day I get to spend with the love of my life reminds me that I am blessed that someone saved his life. The second reason is that Michael and I struggled to have children of our own. I had many challenges as a teenager into my college years. I went through numerous surgeries. When Michael and I were married, I couldn't wait to be a mom. But what happened so easily for many of my friends was not my path. We went through countless sessions of fertility treatments. Every day I wake up and see or speak to my 2 children, I feel blessed. The greatest job I will ever have is being their mom.
Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it. The funny part is, whenever it comes to conservatives and speaking on abortions, you got to hit those 3. You got to hit those 3 things: faith, family, and fundamental religious oppression. Because that's what Nikki Haley did. I love the fact that she says we have to have a national consensus on abortion. We did. Roe versus Wade. We literally had a landmark case that at one point the Supreme Court held up to be the law of the land, saying that abortion is legal in all 50 states. That was the consensus. What Nikki Haley means to say is that no, what we really need is for everybody to get along with our fundamentalist, oppressive religion, that we are going to force women to become brood mares and carry babies to term, only to have them put in adoption centers and deny same-sex couples from adopting them because it does not fit with our religious oppressive views. And at the same time, hope to God that child grows up just enough to where they can enlist in the armed forces because we support the troops. That's all it is. And it's amazing to me how she stood there and says a national consensus that, no woman, we should help the woman, give her all the material. Oh, you mean shame her into carrying the baby? Oh, you mean shame her in carrying it to term? And see, this is the thing that a lot of these people out here who are pro-birth. Notice I said pro-birth because pro-life is really a bullshit term, but you're pro-birth. And how you're pro-birth is for the simple fact of the matter is that you do not care about a child until it's born. And after it's born, you don't care. You push it off to the side because you don't want to see someone who was forced to carry a child they did not want. And I find it amazing that these same individuals don't see that you're oppressing women. At the same time, I find it densely amazing that some women who still vote conservative and still say they are for against abortion don't realize you are shooting yourself in the foot and reloading. But again, this is the reason why I say we need to be a lot more aware of what is going on with these politicians. Because again, 2024 is going to be an interesting year. And if Nikki Haley can beat Trump, that's saying a lot. But I will say this about the Supreme Court, because I keep worrying the whole entire time because they're overly conservative. But for once, they actually got this one right. I'm kind of surprised.
Decision on the abortion pill. Mifepristone remains approved for use in America, at least for now, while legal challenges continue. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze is at the Supreme Court with the decision seen as a relief by abortion rights advocates and pharmaceutical companies. Elizabeth, good morning.
Good morning, Janae. Well, this decision means that mifepristone will stay available to women across the country for now, as this legal battle over the medication used in more than half of U.S. abortions continues to play out. So in a decision 7-2 last night at the Supreme Court, the court put a pause on rulings from lower courts that would have severely restricted access to mifepristone. Conservative Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented, indicating that they would have let those restrictions go into effect. Now, the court's decision, as you say, is a big relief for abortion rights advocates, for the pharmaceutical industry, for the Biden administration. They all oppose a ruling by a federal judge in Texas who sided with anti-abortion activists, saying mifepristone should have never been approved by the FDA more than 20 years ago. President Biden saying in a statement last night, "I continue to stand by FDA's evidence-based approval of mifepristone. The stakes could not be higher for women across America." So what happens now? Starting May 17th, the merits of that Texas case will be heard in oral arguments at the conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. That decision could ultimately end up back here at the Supreme Court. So bottom line, status quo on the abortion pill as this winds through the courts. But the Supreme Court has now weighed in on abortion access twice in the last year after overturning Roe v. Wade. This legal fight is far from over. Whit.
A long legal battle.
Well, they are right about that. It is a long legal battle, but leave it to the Supreme Court to actually get one right. Again, this goes back to what I've said. That, again, women's rights need to be protected. And if you don't want to carry a baby, then you shouldn't be forced to carry one. But it is amazing that this was the response to abortion, to the Roe v. Wade being struck down, and that a lot of states, heavily conservative, already had trigger laws put into place to either ban abortion or to restrict abortion after a set number of weeks. So yes, women out there have had to go back to the mail to get their abortion pill. But the fact that you have others of conservatives and abortion groups out there who are trying to lobby to prevent women from getting access to abortion pills says a lot. Mainly put that The Handmaid's Tale is not just a story, but apparently it's real life for a lot of people, because a lot of people want to see women as nothing more than brood mares. Yes, I said it, and it's sickening. But again, for now, women can still get their abortion pills via the mail. So we'll see how that one goes. But there's a name we haven't said a lot on this podcast, and I am surprised until today because former failure in chief Donald Trump, the same guy who is facing multiple lawsuits, taking on the U.S. government, the FBI, the same guy who is still going around like everything's fine, saying that 2024 he's gonna run again, and that he's gonna right the wrongs in Congress, and that all 15 of his followers are still rooting loudly behind him. Yeah, that guy. We can go ahead and add another lawsuit to that burning pile of his BS.
Attorney out of Fulton County in Georgia is giving a timeline now for when she will announce whether or not she plans to charge former President Trump and others. It is as soon as this summer. I want to bring in Garrett Hake, who is live for us on the Hill. He covers all things Donald Trump and beyond. And Garrett, I don't want to give it all away in the intro. It is summertime, right? And the reason why this is so interesting is we should know, I think by Labor Day, whether or not a presidential candidate, right, running to win the White House will have 2 indictments against them or just 1.
And frankly, he could have more than that, since we know almost nothing about the timeline of the 2 federal investigations into Donald Trump. But yes, we now know what Fani Willis meant by imminent when she said back in January that charging decisions would be imminent. For her, it meant summer. She's now saying in a letter to the local sheriff's department there in Fulton County, yes, I'm going to make an announcement sometime between July 11th and September 1st. And based on what she called open source intelligence, presumably watching programs like this one during the New York City indictment of Donald Trump, she says she believes could be need for additional security. Now, she doesn't come right out and say there would be an indictment, and presumably there could be a need for additional security even in the buildup if she chooses not to indict the former president and perhaps indicts others or no one at all in her probe of the election interference down in Georgia. But we have that window. It's going to be a hot summer in Georgia. It's going to be a hot time in Atlanta. And Hallie, by the way, August is also when we're expected to see the first Republican primary debate.
Right.
So, I mean, you could have all of this coming to a head at the exact same time with all the candidates expected to be in the race by then. Remember, Mike Pence said over the weekend, end of June is his deadline. So it could all be coming to a head for early summer this year.
And what's so funny is August is typically such a sleepy time in this town of Washington, Garrett. Not this year, it seems. Let me ask you, and I just want to remind people, right, of the multiple, we'll throw this up as we can, that sort of spiderweb graphic that we have of Donald Trump and the investigations he faces. One is obviously the issue that he faces with the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. He's been indicted now for basically lying about business records related to a hush money payment. Then there's this thing in Georgia. That infamous call now, right, to find the votes, that he tried to interfere illegally with the legitimate election results in 2020. Then there's the special counsel thing, which is, of course, related to January 6th, what he did around then, related to those classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Here's my question for you, and I don't know if we have an answer. If Fani Willis decides not to bring charges against Donald Trump, and we don't know what she's going to do, right, will she tell us that? Or in other words, are we on pins and needles until September 1st, and then that's it if she doesn't say anything?
She will tell us. Her office has made clear that they are going to make some statement publicly, regardless of what charges they decide to bring. They know this case has been in the public eye for far too long to simply wrap it up and say, that's all, folks, nothing to see here. But remember, in Georgia, it's not just Donald Trump who could potentially be indicted. This investigation has been wide-ranging. There's the so-called fake electors here. There's any number of potential people who could be indicted in a case that I think a lot of people close to Trump have looked at as some of the, perhaps the most legally serious, the most perilous case for him, at least far more so than the New York City and New York State case.
You hit on something interesting, the idea that sources close to Donald Trump see this as legally perilous, because politically, Garrett, and that's a mouthful, I can only imagine that publicly they will spin it as a potential boon to him, especially if it's, let's say, before that next Republican primary debate. We don't know when in August it's going to be. After the polling numbers that we saw when he was indicted the first time in Manhattan, he got a bump. I mean, we saw that spike in polls.
not just in polling, in donations too. It was, at least a sugar rush to his campaign, possibly something more, because that indictment caused Republicans to rally around him. But that was also for something that's, at least politically speaking, a less serious charge, right? This is something that had been widely out in the wash since 2016. He'd already run 2 national elections, with the whole Stormy Daniels saga being widely known. The Georgia case goes right to this idea of attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. It would be the first time that that's brought before a jury. It would be the first time it'd been brought forward in a legal sense, not just by members of Congress here, but in front of a judge and a jury. That's a much higher stakes thing for Trump and his allies to have to deal with.
So literally and figuratively, as you can see, guys, it's a lot. Fulton County DA may or may not bring charges. Again, this is going back to Trump and his call back to Georgia, talking about, I need you to find the 187,000 votes to keep me in place. So there's that. So again, Trump's got a lot of stuff going on. And as I said before, if he somehow makes it to the first primary in 2024 unscathed, that alone will be a miracle, considering the fact of how many lawsuits he's facing. And let's be honest, if you're a Trump lawyer, it's Christmas for all the billable hours you can put to that man. But again, the fact that people still keep giving this man money is the only reason this man still stays flush. And as Don King said it best, only in America. So the last story we got, guys, of course, is coming from my home state of progressively backward Tennessee, where, again, the Tennessee State Congress has concluded their session for the season, where nothing was done. That nothing was done about school shootings, but the most they ever got done was eliminating 2 black young lawmakers for basically crapping on the rules of decorum, but did nothing for school shootings or advocating for new gun laws. That being said, one of the representatives that did vote to have Justin Pearson and to have both Justin's Pearson actually put out, actually found himself resigning today. And all I can say is karma.
As the legislative session wraps up, Representative Scotty Campbell's desk inside of the House chambers was empty Thursday afternoon.
We received Representative Campbell's letter of resignation today, at around 2 o'clock, and we accepted that resignation. But as far as the details of that, I actually, along with the other members of the body, became aware of that when the public became aware.
At the end of March of this year, the House Workplace Discrimination and Harassment Subcommittee launched an ethics investigation after receiving a complaint regarding Republican Representative Scotty Campbell from Johnson County. Lawmakers tell WSMV4 he was allegedly sexually harassing a Capitol intern.
The Speaker of the House was a part of a cover-up.
Democratic House Representative Justin Jones, who's been at the forefront of passing common sense gun legislation and was recently reinstated after he, along with Justin J. Pearson, was expelled, believes House Speaker Cameron Sexton knew about these allegations.
Again, that he put the protecting this lawmaker over the well-being of these interns, who should be protected, who were courageous to come forward. But it's very unfortunate that it took this point in just the second to last day of session for them to finally do something, but only because it was brought up in the news today.
Speaker Sexton, can you talk about the resignation of Representative Campbell today? Any comment on that, sir? I caught up with the Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, after session. Sexton denies he knew about Campbell's allegations, even though the subcommittee, which is bipartisan, sent him a letter on March 29th. He explains how the process that was implemented by the General Assembly in 2016 works.
They have to determine first if they think there's a violation. If they do, then they can talk to witnesses, they can talk to members, they can talk to the victim, they can do the investigation, and then they decide what corrective action should be taken. At that point, the Speaker does not know any of the details before or after, other than that a complaint has been filed and that a member is involved, because that's where it would go if it was a member.
This is the memorandum that was addressed to the House Speaker, but it doesn't give any details on the complaint. But the subcommittee did agree Campbell did violate the policy.
This should concern all Tennesseans, regardless of Republican, Democrat, Independent. We want our interns to feel safer. We want our children to feel safer. That's why we're talking about common sense gun laws. But again, they put power over all else.
And he's right. Representative Justin Jones is 110% right. That keep in mind, nothing was done. This man who sexually harassed an intern didn't show up for work, didn't show up for his congressional seat, resigned, and that's it. And of course, let's be honest, this is coming from the same group. This is from the same lawmakers where Scott DeJarlais, for all those that don't know, look him up. This man not only cheated on his wife, but had multiple abortions had forced his mistresses to have multiple abortions. Was still allowed to serve with no issue. Someone, and again, this is kind of it's never been actually validated, but let's be honest, defecated on a certain person's seat at the state house. That person's still allowed to serve. They know who they are. And again, it seems the only time that this body of individuals for Tennessee wants to do something, it's usually when they're called out for not doing their jobs. But shout out to Justin Pearson, Justin Jones, for trying to shine a light on everything. But I do find that it's karma coming to roost when you see individuals like that. But again, that's my home state of Tennessee, progressively backwards. But moving right along, guys, we're going to get to our feel-good moment. As usual, how the Frack we got here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we can lose your faith in humanity. But hey, it's Wednesday. It's hump day. Tomorrow's Friday, which is Thursday. We will leave you guys out with some good vibrations. And hopefully this next story will do it, because I love education, especially when teachers do more than what they should be doing. Because let's be honest, teachers don't get paid for the things that they go through. That's a whole other story. But this school in particular took sign language to a whole new level, not only teaching it to ASL students, but to other students to actually gain a new skill, as well as to open up the communication line between kids.
This room in Connecticut is silent. These students are all deaf or hard of hearing, communicating using American Sign Language, or ASL.
You're late.
While more and more deaf actors are appearing in films, enhancing understanding of deaf culture, few people know how to sign. That makes life outside of this special Hartford school a challenge.
Many hearing people have the misconception that deaf people can't. We can do anything. The only thing that we don't have is hearing.
120 miles south in this New York City school, students are bridging the language gap. It's the city's only sign language school where hearing or hard of hearing students outnumber the deaf. Most classes are bilingual in English and ASL, but some classes, no spoken word at all, immersing students in deaf culture.
I feel happy that I'm here.
Before now, 14-year-old Sabrina Morales, who's hard of hearing, was in a mainstream school and says she felt isolated from hearing students.
I can just show who I really am.
Because you see yourself here.
Yes. I'm here because I want to have a better communication with my brother.
Shirley Piedra's brother, Omar, is fully deaf. She's learning to sign because, like most little sisters, she wants to be heard. Do you think it's made you and your brother even closer than you would have been otherwise?
Yeah, made us a lot closer. Every time I sign to him, I see a smile on his face.
After high school, Shirley's planning on becoming an ASL interpreter.
For example, I'm going to the store.
So how would you sign that?
I go to store.
And she's already getting started.
I just feel like there should be a lot more interpreters out there for people like my brother.
A sign of what's to come.
And I think that's pretty cool. Number one, just because, yes, teaching ASL is definitely a great skill to have. Also, it's a way to really communicate with those who only can communicate through sign language. I see the same thing about dual skills, about kids learning Spanish or French or German or Arabic or Ubuntu. You can keep going down the list, but imagine if you're inducing multiple language to kids and actually having them turn bilingual. It's a beautiful thing, and I will never argue with that. Only because teachers make it freaking possible. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. And thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting me know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Before I do get out of here, guys, shameless plugging as usual. Shout out to my friend Ron at BigVZA on all social media. You can definitely check him out, bigvza.gmail.com, and also his YouTube channel where there's plenty of free music content. No need, he will not copyright you or strike you like those other places will. Oh no. But if there is music you are interested in purchasing, definitely check him out, BigVZA on all social media. As far as me, guys, you can find me on most social media, Black Fox 447. I usually do reviews on everything that I read, that I play, that I see out there, especially gym stuff, because I try to do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, let me actually make the link at the bottom that you're seeing there trailing just a wee bit bigger. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it'll take you to the link tree that's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, off on this podcast. Definitely like, definitely share, definitely subscribe. Let me know what you think, because I do want to keep the conversation going on the stories that we did cover tonight. That being said, guys, again, protect yourselves out there. I know the pandemic emergency measures have dropped, but still protect yourselves out there at the same time. Celebrate those who get the win. Celebrate those who get the win. It may not be your turn, but it doesn't mean that your turn is not coming. But again, celebrate others who get the win, because we need to have more of that out there. At the same time, don't be a dick. It's just that simple. The last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are giving you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a lot of perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better in society as we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman as a director of national security, electing our first Black 4-star military general. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We will all get through this. Peace.